Well, good morning. Yes, I'm Pete Najarian. This is the take on this Wednesday morning. It's hump day. Actually, it's even a little bit more than hump day because we've got Friday off. And just to make sure that you remember that, because the expiration cycle will end on April 1st, which is tomorrow. So here we are, and we're looking back at yesterday, and wow, a bit of a yawner to some degree. Now, there's always movement in between, but when you really look at what was going on in the markets and you see the S&P and you see the Dow and just a little bit of pressure here and there. And then you look over at the NASDAQ, and it was a bumpy ride, but a nice ride to finish back up above 13,000 to recapture some of what that movement was, which was a little bit of pressure to the downside. But, you know, it was another interesting day, despite the fact that it was a bit quiet. I'll tell you what, it's amazing to look at the volumes in the options world where we've been talking about 40 plus million. We slipped a little bit. And then yesterday, and maybe this is because of the holiday week, it certainly could be, but 28.2 million contracts yesterday, 28.2 million. Now, we've been talking about feeling pretty slow when we're in the mid 30 million sort of category. So yesterday, significantly less than what we had been seeing and what we're seeing the start of today. Maybe that's going to be the play for the rest of this week. Doesn't mean that there isn't individual names that are moving, though, and we certainly are seeing some of that. Yesterday, we look over at the technology space and you look at some of the closes, you look at the semiconductors, for instance, they were down a little bit, but you got balanced out a little bit by biotech, which was actually performing reasonably well. And a lot of those no PE or extreme PE type names seem to be what everybody was looking for. We're seeing a little bit of that today, but yesterday it was Tesla, it was Baidu, it was Peloton, it was Zoom. You know, those high multiple style type names, that certainly stuck out. We had volatility in a fairly tight range, call it from 19.5 to 21.5. We finished closer to that 19.5 area, which is pretty much where we are today, at least to start things out. But there is one area that was the standout. There is no doubt about that. Did you take a look at what's going on in the material space? U.S. Steel up 8.5%. Cliffs up 6%. I got Alcoa was up nearly 3%. So the material space definitely has been something we've been talking about a lot. We've talked also about how energy, we just all of a sudden hit the brakes. We had this great move with energy. We had some great moves on these beta names and Chevron and Exxon and XLE and XOP and all of that. But we've really slowed down. You haven't heard us talk nearly as much about energy as we had been. And that's because we just aren't seeing the same kind of activity that we had been seeing in energy. But we certainly see a pickup of more and more and more in the material space and in the industrial space and in the financials. So that's where it seems like we've seen a little bit more of that shift. Now, we might start seeing a little bit more energy hitting here and there, but for now, it's right there where we're talking about with the material space. So you kick off today, everybody's talking about Biden, the infrastructure, $2 trillion, all the rest of that. That seems to be catching people in terms of what the news story is right now. But when you look over at the Dow, really not seeing the kind of changes that maybe you would expect if that was what really was the topic that was shifting things around. On the other hand, you look over at the NASDAQ started out about 70 points in the pre-market. It's up about 110 points by the time we opened. And then certainly we started to see this big move. 30 minutes in, we were up over 200 points in the NASDAQ, and we still seem to be hanging on right around there. I'm just taking a very quick check. We still are close to 200 points to the upside. As I mentioned, volatility, very just sort of stuck in that range, and it's a tighter range today than it was yesterday. We're only an hour into the trading session, however. So the early morning movers, well, technology's up about 1%. Semiconductors are about 1.25%. Biotech up nearly 2%. It's Moderna, it's NVIDIA, and then you start to look at the Teslas and the Apples, but we're seeing, again, those high multiples and no multiple type names, the Pelotons and those kind of names that are definitely supportive of that move of why you're seeing the NASDAQ moving the way it is. What really stands out for today, Walgreens. Now, this is a name that just a week or so ago, not even, last Thursday, it was a pitch stock for me when I was on the 5 p.m. show. It's Walgreens. Now, Walgreens is not a name that you see making gigantic moves up or even down very frequently. But today, a really nice move, and a lot of what we were talking about and why it was interesting as a pitch stock just last week, because when you look at this company, they are in a really interesting spot because of the pandemic and all of the follow through from what's been the crazy 1 year of the pandemic. And there are people out there that really don't go to Walgreens. Now they did, and now they actually enjoy the experience, and they maybe start to put that together to maybe be a part of Walgreens going forward. And that's where some of the potential is for some of that growth and some of the earnings that are projected for the next year and going forward. And certainly that is something that I think people are, starting to embrace, put their arms around. Stock up nearly 5%, at least earlier, that's what we've seen. So no TV, no CNBC, none of that for me today, but I'm going to give you a couple of unusuals. Number one, Under Armour. Now, this one stands out for me because, we see it occasionally here and there. It's not a frequent hit for us, but we do see enough of it, and it shows up. Stock was trading about $18, just underneath that level, and a buyer of 5,100 of the April 18.5 calls. So it gives a little bit of time, because obviously this is your first expiration cycle this week. This is a regular expiration cycle, which is normally going to be that third Friday. So those are going for about 50 to 60 cents. UA, Under Armour, is that particular symbol. Now, next, Cliffs, Cleveland Cliffs, CLF. Now, this is another one of these names in the material space. And yesterday, talking about that on the halftime report, about all these different areas and how much activity we are seeing in the material space. Well, once again, Cliffs, big move already today, but maybe there's a little bit more, because we had a buyer with the stock trading right around 20 bucks. We had a buyer of 5,800 of the April 1st. Yeah, that's tomorrow, April 1st, 20 calls. This is somebody that's just looking at it and saying, you know what? This trend, this move, this gigantic move that we have seen to the upside, we think it might continue. Don't really know for how long, but we think at least it lasts one more day. So we'll see how that plays out. But definitely a very, very extremely short-term play that we are seeing here in Cliffs. So those were going for about 15 cents all the way up to about 50 cents. Again, that was with the stock trading right around exactly where the strike was that they are attacking. Those are the April 1st 20 calls. So there's your two unusuals. Folks, have an understanding, and by having an understanding, all I mean to tell you is, if you know the derivatives market, understand the derivatives market, and you understand these Greeks and all of that goes into the pricing models, certainly gives you a much better experience. Got great people here at Market Rebellion, and so you're going to want to get educated, and definitely either read the books or get educated, wherever you might do that. But Market Rebellion, I think we got the best in the industry. So you want to know the derivatives markets, because it's a way to do things with leverage, but also there's a lot of hedging involved and all kinds of other different ways that you can attack the markets in something different than what you normally know about, which is just buying and or selling option or stocks rather. Folks, have a great day of trading. We'll see you later on, and enjoy your holiday weekend, the long one, unless you're going to be here tomorrow. I will see you here tomorrow.